Imagine waking up tomorrow, right? And you find out that money just no longer exists.
Like, completely gone.
Completely gone. You check the news, but there are no politicians to listen to, there are no borders between countries, and absolutely no laws to enforce anything.
That is wild.
Right. And then, perhaps the most shocking realization of all hits you, the very concept of the family has just been completely erased.
I mean, for most of us, that sounds like the literal setup for a dystopian nightmare.
Exactly. You would expect total immediate chaos. But today we are exploring a worldview that claims this exact scenario is not a recipe for disaster,
Right.
but the ultimate and maybe the only cure for human suffering.
It is an incredibly provocative premise,
Mm.
When we usually think about building a better future, we think about upgrading our current systems.
Sure, like making things more efficient.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We talk about writing fairer laws or building more robust economies, maybe reforming political parties. But the document we're looking at today just completely abandons that approach.
It just throws the whole thing out.
It really does. It argues that attempting to fix human civilization by tweaking its current institutions is just a fool's errand. The author is calling for a complete, ground-up demolition of the societal foundation itself.
Welcome to this deep dive. We are constantly hunting for ideas that challenge the way we view the world. And if you are listening to this, you are the kind of person who isn't afraid to get to the core of complex, highly controversial, and radical perspectives.
Absolutely.
So today's source material is a translated philosophical and political manifesto. It was published pretty recently on March 2, 2024. And it's titled The Future of Humanity, Shufeng-Style Communism, written by an author named Shufeng.
And before we jump into the actual architecture of this vision, we should probably clarify our mission today.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because unpacking a manifesto that calls for the abolition of laws, money, and families is, well, it's bound to stir up strong reactions.
Oh, without a doubt.
So our goal here is not to endorse this ideology, and we're not here to condemn it either. We are simply acting as your guides to deconstruct the text, to understand its internal logic.
Right, just to examine the fascinating arguments the author makes.
Exactly. We want to show you the blueprints and analyze how the author believes this radical new structure is actually supposed to stand up.
So let's open up those blueprints. The foundation of Shufeng's argument actually starts by looking backward. The text opens with this massive, sweeping diagnosis of human history.
Right, covering a huge span of time.
Yeah, he looks at 5,000 years of civilization across Europe, Africa, Asia, the Americas, Oceania. And basically, the author sees a relentless, unbroken loop of war, hunger, disease, and turmoil.
It's a very grim view. He points out that despite thousands of years of human effort across literally every continent and culture, no nation and no individual really has ever managed to live a life purely filled with joy, freedom, and bliss.
Not a single one.
Right. So the text isolates the core pillars of our modern society. Our nations, our religions, political parties, money, power structures, and it declares them all an absolute, complete failure.
They just haven't solved the problem of human suffering.
No, they haven't. But the text goes much further than just calling them failures.
Yeah, it's not just that a government or an economic system is inefficient at stopping suffering. Shufeng argues that these institutions actively create and multiply our burdens.
They are the source of the pain.
Exactly. Think about it like trying to put out a raging house fire with a fire hose, right? But then you realize the hose is actually connected to a tank of gasoline.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The very institutions we built to protect ourselves, the things we use to organize our world, are, according to this text, the exact things burning the house down.
That analogy captures the author's logic perfectly. Because if you view nations as inherently divisive because, they require borders,
Right.
or if you view money as inherently oppressive because it requires scarcity and class division, then you just cannot reform them.
You can't make a kinder border.
Exactly. You cannot make a kinder border or a more equitable system of absolute scarcity. The diagnosis is so severe that the treatment has to be absolute eradication.
Complete removal.
Yes. According to Shufeng, nations must disappear. Religions must vanish. Political parties must cease to exist. And money and power must be entirely eliminated.
Let's follow that logic, though. I mean, if you tear down every single modern institution overnight, the immediate assumption is that society would violently collapse backward.
Oh, of course. That's the natural fear.
If you just delete global governments, borders, and currency, human nature suggests we'd be back to fighting over resources with sharp sticks, right? In localized tribes, probably within a matter of weeks.
It's the classic dystopian trope.
Yeah. Without the walls holding the roof up, doesn't the whole structure just crush us?
Well, the text anticipates that exact fear. The second part of the manifesto explicitly rejects the idea that eliminating money and power will cause humanity to revert to primitive tribes or, isolated city-states.
Okay, so how does he explain that? Why wouldn't we regress?
He provides a detailed argument centering on human evolution. The text argues that our collective cognitive level, our technology, our dynamic thinking, and just our general wisdom have reached unprecedented heights.
Meaning, we have essentially evolved past the need for the training wheels of government and currency.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. People simply do not want to go backward technologically or socially. But to prove this point about global evolution, the author makes a very unexpected comparison.
Oh, right. This part really caught me off guard.
Yeah, he equates the rejection of global governments to the way people view modern relationships.
Which is such a leap.
It is. The text states that just as people today do not want to regress technologically, an increasing number of individuals are reluctant to enter the, quote, hardships of marriage and family.
It is a striking pivot. I mean, moving from macroeconomics and geopolitics to the deeply personal realm of romantic relationships.
It's definitely a defining feature of Suefeng's argument. He's attempting to show a universal pattern of human consciousness outgrowing restrictive structures, whether those structures are global borders or, marriage licenses.
But I have to challenge this leap in logic.
Fair enough.
Comparing the deliberate collapse of the global financial system to someone just deciding they'd rather stay single instead of getting married, it seems incredibly disproportionate.
It does seem like a stretch on the surface.
How does the text bridge the gap between global geopolitical institutions and highly personal family dynamics?
To bridge that gap, you really have to understand a core tenet of Suefeng's underlying philosophy, which he states super clearly in the text. He writes, all material phenomena are the outcomes of consciousness.
Okay, let's unpack that for a second. What does it actually mean to say material phenomena are the outcomes of consciousness in practical sense?
Well, it is a complete inversion of how we typically view societal structures. I mean, often we think our environment and our institutions shape our minds, right?
Right, like society molds us.
Exactly. But Suefeng argues that the formless dictates the physical. Human consciousness is the engine, and our physical institutions are merely the exhaust.
Wow, okay.
So the text claims that because human consciousness has evolved and expanded, it just no longer fits inside the old containers.
So the institutions are the containers.
Yes. We are letting go of the macro structure of the nation state and the microstructure of the traditional family because our internal state has outgrown them.
I see.
Society won't devolve when these things are removed because the consciousness that require them just no longer exists. It is framed not as a societal collapse, but as a necessary shedding of an old skin.
Okay, so if we aren't devolving into warring tribes, and we are voluntarily shedding everything from the United Nations down to the concept of a wedding ring, what does this highly evolved consciousness actually build in its place?
Right, what's next?
Yeah, what does the new world look like?
The text provides a very specific blueprint for this new era. He calls it Lifechanyuan. Yes. It is also referred to as Suefeng-style communism, or the kingdom of the greatest creator.
So let's dive into the mechanics of Lifechanyuan. We have already established that this society operates with 0 nations, 0 religions, no political parties, no money, and no power structures.
Right.
It also dictates 0 marriages and 0 families. But it goes even deeper into the void of structure, doesn't it?
It really does. There are no constitutions, no laws, and no regulations of any kind.
Absolutely 0 legal framework.
None. No police forces, no courts, no zoning boards, nothing that dictates behavior through external force or consequence.
But anyone hearing this is immediately going to start looking for the loopholes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if a global society of 8 billion people has literally 0 laws and no enforcement mechanisms, what stops someone from just hoarding all the resources?
The classic human nature argument.
Exactly. We have thousands of years of evidence showing that when resources are left unguarded, someone will eventually exploit them. How does a global society function without basic rules?
Well, the text answers that skepticism by outlining a total paradigm shift in how resources are managed and just how humans behave generally.
Okay.
In Suefeng-style communism, all resources are shared worldwide. And to explain how this functions, the author uses a very specific paradox. He says, individuals possess nothing, yet own everything.
Possess nothing, yet own everything.
Yeah,
I think the best way to visualize that is probably something like a massive global public library system, right? But for all of human
that's a
needs.
great way to look at it.
You don't have the deed to a house, and you don't have the title to a car. You don't personally possess them in your name, but you have access to housing and transportation whenever you need it because it belongs to the collective.
Right.
You own the right to use everything, but you possess nothing exclusively.
That analogy really helps clarify the physical mechanics of it,
Hmm.
but the psychological mechanics, that's where the real challenge lies.
Yeah, because of what I mentioned earlier, the tragedy of the commons.
Exactly. What stops the selfish actor from taking 3 cars and 2 houses? The text answer is that Lifechanyuan relies entirely on unselfish and selfless individuals, people who adhere strictly to an internal set of values guiding their conduct,
Oh, it's all internal.
completely internal. Because there are no external laws to punish bad behavior, the internal moral compass has to be absolute.
Wow.
The text envisions these deeply aligned individuals coming together to create what it calls a magnificent symphony of life.
A symphony of life. That is a compelling image. But, a symphony only works if every single musician plays their part perfectly and listens to everyone else.
Right.
If one person decides to play a chaotic solo, the whole thing turns into noise.
It falls apart.
This sounds like a pure utopian fantasy. It relies on the assumption that every human on Earth can achieve perfect selflessness. The author has to know people will read this and dismiss it as a completely unworkable daydream.
He absolutely knows that. He explicitly anticipates that reaction in the text.
Right.
Yeah. He writes that readers might dismiss his blueprint as a mere conceptual and theoretical exploration, brushing it off as fantasy utopian communism.
Because it sounds exactly like that.
But Shuifeng firmly asserts that this is not a fantasy, because the core mechanics of Lifechanyuan are already being practiced in the real world.
See, this was the turning point in the manifesto for me. The author points to a real-world community model called the second home.
Yes. The text presents the second home as the practical, living activity of Lifechanyuan. According to the document, this community was founded in April 2009 and has been operating successfully for 15 years.
So it is essentially a 15-year beta test.
Pretty much.
Think of a software startup developing a radical new operating system, You don't just roll that out to 8 billion devices all at once and pray it doesn't crash the global grid.
That would be a disaster.
Right, you run a controlled pilot program, you get a small group of users, put them in a closed environment, iron out the bugs, and generate data to prove the software actually functions in the real world. Only then do you try to scale it.
And it is a deeply effective rhetorical strategy from the author. He introduces wildly abstract, seemingly impossible theories, a society with no laws, no money, no marriages, relying purely on internal values, and then he anchors those massive abstractions with a grounded, practical claim.
Because he says there's proof.
Exactly. The text states there is a wealth of textual, visual, and video evidence of this second home community available online.
So he's saying, go look it up.
Yes. The strategy is to use the empirical evidence of a functioning micro-community to validate an overarching macro philosophy. If it works for a small group for 15 years, the text implies, it proves the underlying principles are sound.
But the leap from a localized community experiment to every single human being on Earth, that is almost incomprehensible.
At a staggering scale.
Scaling that kind of cultural and psychological alignment is incredibly difficult, which leads us to the final and undoubtedly the most difficult part of this blueprint. What is the ultimate hurdle to scaling this global symphony and making Lifechanyuan a reality?
The ultimate hurdle, as defined by the text, is that all of humanity must undergo a profound spiritual purification.
Profound spiritual purification.
Yes. Zufeng acknowledges that this is a monumental, staggering undertaking. The shift cannot just be structural, right? It must be internal.
Because if you are going to live in a world with no laws and no money, you can't just change the rules of the game. You have to fundamentally change the players.
Exactly. The text states that the core of this spiritual purification involves building what the author calls a human soul garden.
A soul garden.
And the primary task of this garden is to systematically uproot all negative, pessimistic, psychological, and emotional elements from the human heart.
And the author provides a highly specific hit list of these toxic elements.
He does. The text mandates the complete eradication of greed, jealousy, comparison, selfishness, laziness, complaints, hatred, and ego.
That is quite the list.
According to Suifeng, every single one of these traits must be entirely uprooted for the society to function.
Okay, let's pause on that list because this is where the philosophy clashes heavily with, human nature,
Right,
uprooting hatred, extreme greed, and selfishness. Most people would agree that removing those would drastically improve the world.
for sure.
But he also includes comparison and laziness on that list of things to eradicate. I have to push back on that.
Good.
Yeah, isn't a certain degree of comparison the engine of human innovation? If a farmer doesn't compare his low crop yield to his neighbor's high crop yield, does he ever bother inventing a better irrigation system?
That's a really good point.
And laziness, I mean, we often joke that laziness is the mother of invention. Someone invents the wheel because they are too lazy to drag a heavy sled. Uprooting comparison and laziness entirely sounds like you are trying to recode human DNA.
It really highlights the uncompromising nature of Su Feng's vision. We tend to view traits like comparison and ego
Yeah.
as tools that can be managed
Hmm.
or, negotiated with or channeled into productive systems like capitalism.
Right, harness for good.
Exactly. But this manifesto completely rejects that view. For Lifechanyuan to work, the human ego cannot be managed. It must be destroyed.
Destroyed entirely.
Yes. In a society with zero laws and fully shared resources, the ego is the single point of failure.
So even a small amount of comparison is dangerous.
In this framework, yes. If you allow comparison to drive innovation, you inevitably invite jealousy. If you allow laziness to inspire convenience, you invite selfishness.
It's a slippery slope.
Exactly. The text implies that true innovation in this new era wouldn't be driven by a desire to beat a competitor or avoid hard work. It would be driven by a purely selfless desire to enrich the collective symphony.
And if someone falls out of line?
Well, if one person allows ego or jealousy to dictate their actions, the symphony falls out of tune. And without a police force or a judicial system to course-correct that behavior, the entire system breaks down. Therefore, the spiritual purification must be absolute, leaving no trace of the old human drivers.
Wow. It is a staggering demand on human psychology. Let's take a step back and recap the journey we've taken through this manifesto today.
It's been a lot to process.
It really has. We have explored a text that diagnoses 5,000 years of human history as an unbroken cycle of suffering caused by the very institutions we rely on for order.
And the author's proposed solution is the total eradication of all modern institutions, including nations, religions, political parties, money, laws, and even traditional marriages.
And replacing all of that infrastructure with a fully egoless, globally shared society managed entirely through internal moral compasses. A concept the author claims is already proven by a 15-year real-world experiment known as the second home.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it is important to remember our starting premise. Our exploration today was an exercise in understanding a highly unique and controversial worldview. We used the provided text to map out the logic of Shufeng-style communism, examining how the author connects these radical ideas. Our analysis is not an endorsement of the ideology, but an attempt to unpack the architecture of a vastly different perspective on human civilization.
We just wanted to walk you through the blueprints of this proposed world. But as we leave the construction site, I want to leave you with a lingering question that builds on the foundations we've discussed.
I love a good lingering question.
Shuifeng argues that to fix the world, we must first build that human soul garden, entirely uprooting greed, ego, jealousy, and comparison. Let's say we could actually achieve that.
Okay, hypothetically.
Yeah. If we successfully engineered human consciousness to be completely devoid of ego, jealousy, and comparison, do we finally achieve a peaceful paradise? Or do we lose the very friction that makes us human in the first place?
It is a profound paradox to consider. Can humanity survive without its flaws?
A question that definitely sticks with you. Thanks for diving deep into the blueprints with us today. We'll catch you next time.